Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's me, Nkoyo Effiong Lewis, Chief Impact Strategist at Ibani Song Solutions, where we help social impact leaders turn their ideas into impact so they can generate revenue, engage stakeholders, and ultimately transform the world. And of course, without sacrificing culture, capacity, or compliance. And if you're here today, we are talking about why your nonprofit strategy isn't working and what to do instead. And honestly, we are living in incredible times. I'm a millennial, and so I feel like we've been constantly living in, these unprecedented times. And we're here. The nonprofit industry is here. And as much as we would love to be in a different position, the reality is the world is evolving. It is accelerating. Change is happening, and not all of it is great and wonderful for us. Some of it is really shaking the core of the nonprofit sector itself and the way that we have organized ourselves, been led to organize ourselves, the way we have operated in this space. And I think for the very longest time, I have been advocating for us to break the mold and actually look at different ways to diversify revenue, to think about how we actually get to impact, so that our missions move forward and they don't become great, really branding tools that are not things that we can actually live, see, experience. And this moment, while we're living in a world that is crashing in some ways, I'm reading a great book, Unruly, that talks about how technology and politics and the law are all rapidly changing in a way that is making the world unpredictable, really unruly. And I'm a lawyer by training, so there's a piece of that is also seeing the unruling of the world, the way we're pulling back and falling about with laws and how those things impact the way our nonprofit organizations operate. Our nonprofits are vehicles of the state that have implications with our federal laws. And so we are bound up into this thing, whether we like it or not. And so today, what we're actually going to talk about is why your nonprofit strategy isn't working and what to do instead. And I hope that this is a offer of hope and opportunity for you as you're moving forward. I am often critical of how we do things. I'm not one to hold hands with the status quo, and the status quo isn't working. And so if I ruffle your feathers, I apologize in advance. The goal is for us to move forward, and sometimes growth and progress isn't comfortable, but it is necessary. And so one thing that I know that I see the RFPs, I see the people looking for all of this very traditional strategic planning processes, which serve its purpose, maybe served its time. But what I know is that most nonprofit leaders right now are trying to lead from a strategic plan that was designed for a different world. We used to live in a place where there was some stability, where we could forecast, where there would be like sort of one outcome that we could push towards, and we could be really intentional, do our SWOT analysis, etc., and build ourselves a plan there, or at least have a really great report that was funded that sits in somebody's drawer. But that's not the world that we're in right now. And I want us to talk about and spend this time together talking about why strategic planning and the way that we have traditionally done it is not only ineffective, but it's actually dangerous. And so today I'm going to share with you some things that you can do instead. But let's get honest about where we are. The truth is, the old playbook is broken. Between political attacks, funding volatility, burnout at all levels, static planning models just don't hold. They just cannot provide for us what we need. And if we're really honest, many of us are using 5-year plans while we're operating in these 5-minute realities. We are under an administration where things are changing rapidly. We are also in a lived experience where technology is moving rapidly and where our borders and priorities and consistencies are shifting. The ground is absolutely shifting. And so where we are in life right now, our static plans simply can't keep up. Something that you designed a year ago may or may not be relevant. And I would venture to guess that it's probably not as relevant today as it was when you sat down and put that plan together. We have external chaos that is only increasing. And our staffs and our boards are already stretched thin. And so we have to really be thinking about what do we do? How do we move in a moment in time where this is the reality. And I should have said, we also have funder priorities changing, which is something that's happened throughout philanthropy. I don't know that philanthropists and philanthropy as it has set is the heroes that we have always put them out there to be. Because, when something isn't sexy anymore, they shift. But we're seeing that happen even quicker now. I was just reading an article about some nonprofits in California who were seeing their biggest funders sort of drop a lot of programs, just kind of like feeling very much overnight. And that is the reality that those of you who get federal funds, who've seen that those funds have been held up and are now trying to figure out what are we going to do. This is the unshaky ground that we are all on. And so because we are here, whether we want to be or not, we are. The pivot that we need is to move to something that is more agile. We absolutely need to be embracing agility and an agile strategy. So what does that mean? It means that you don't necessarily need more planning. You need strategic agility. You need to look at what the world is right now and be able to make decisions quickly, more quickly than we often want to, more quickly than our bureaucracies, etc., allow us to figure out how you keep pace. And so this is where adaptive tools like scenario planning or strategic learning agendas can be really helpful to help you pivot in real time so that you're not caught off guard by the next crisis. Right now, we don't need to know everything. We need to figure out what are the key things we need to learn right now and what are the important decisions that need to be made to keep us moving from here to the next point. And whereas we've been able to in the past create these really great 5-year plans, 10-year plans that have their value, they have their purpose. But in this moment, if you're going to sustain, if you're going to continue to be able to deliver the services that you want while also having a forward-thinking plan about how you move while the floor is constantly shifting, then we have to also adapt some agility with it. That means that some of the things that we plan to do, we're going to have to scrap, maybe entirely. Maybe they'll never come back. I think the pandemic was an opportunity to help us see that some things that we've done in the past don't need to be done or no longer relevant. And as organizations, social change, social impact, advocacy, justice-based organizations, we have to have that level of agility too. We have to have strategy that breathes, plans that bend but don't break. And we also, as leaders, have to adapt that sort of resilience and agile mindset. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that Nkoyo is always going to say leadership is an inside job first. And the more set in our ways that we are, the harder it is going to be to adjust to the changes that are happening at record speed right now. So you absolutely need to be looking at some more adaptive tools. You need to be thinking about how you're pivoting, how you are planning and preparing to pivot for the next few pivots. There have been a lot of different ways that people have talked about this. I used to teach on the VUCA framework and VUCA Prime, which I think is still really relevant. I have a great training around that, how to navigate disruption with courage, confidence, and clarity. But I think it's absolutely important right now because it's really about having approaches and frameworks rather than really being super stubborn and pinned in certain positions. But here's the thing. Before you can actually develop an agile strategy, before you can figure out how you want to move forward and do the things that you need to do, you actually need to do this one thing first. And this is the thing that I consistently see leaders of organizations skip when they're going into sort of like reactionary mode of like, we got to figure out what to do. Let's just do something next. And I would encourage you to not just do things for the sake of doing them, but for actually to make deep, reasoned, thoughtful, intentional, and deliberate decisions. And so one of the first things that you can do is actually look inward. There is no external strategy that can work if your internal foundation is unstable. I'm going to repeat that. There is no external strategy that can work if your internal foundation is unstable. Before you face what's coming, whether it's known or unknown, we are definitely living in a lot of uncertainty right now. You have to look into the mirror. You have to figure out where your internal alignment and misalignment is so that your strategy doesn't exacerbate whatever is already misaligned. And this, again, is where a lot of leaders get stuck. I'm a big proponent of capacity-based wisdom, the nonprofit life cycles, stages, and using your life cycle stage to really decide what type of strategy makes sense based on what those indicators show us in terms of where you are as an organization as a whole. And so what I constantly see when people come to me and they want to talk about, we want to build this strategy, we want to do this thing, we want to go get corporate sponsors, we want to maybe spin off and create an LLC that's wholly owned by the nonprofit. Our board is completely a mess and they're holding us back. We don't know what to do. What I often find is that they're adapting strategies or solutions that don't necessarily meet them where they are, that don't actually take into consideration who they are and what they do. And so many years ago, after representing nonprofits in a legal capacity, I saw this trend over and over and over again. And so I actually designed my first legal subscription that also included some organizational development type support for organizations to ensure that whatever legal strategy we were applying to their work, they actually had the internal capacity and culture to create it. And so I designed our Impact Triad Framework. And our goal at all the work that we do with organizations now in the governance and compliance space is to make sure that we are leveraging data, whether that's qualitative or quantitative, to diagnose where we are before we design where we're trying to go. And so the Impact Triad focuses on our 3 C's, which we believe have to be in place in order for you to see deep impact. And that is culture. And so we talk about your alignment, your engagement, and power. Who has it? Who doesn't have it? Where do we need to get it? How do we connect with it? We look at capacity, your systems, your infrastructure, your adaptability, all of these things that actually make sure that we can turn vision and mission into as something actually tangible that exists on earth. And then, of course, compliance. I'm a lawyer by training. And so we know that the nonprofits are wrapped up in all types of regulation. And so we want to make sure that your governance, your risk, and your legal readiness are also together. But without seeing that, without using this sort of leadership diagnostic to really make sure that we know where we're going, that we have the team that's aligned and energized to lead change, that we have systems that support flexibility and growth, that we can pivot without putting our tax-exempt status or public trust and reputation at risk. And if we can't do these things, if we don't know the answer to this, where we are in those places, there's not an external strategy that can save you. I'm going to make that very bold statement. If you don't know whether your team is aligned and energized to lead change, if you have the systems and flexibility to support growth, and that you can pivot without jeopardizing your reputation or your tax-exempt status, then it doesn't matter what strategy you put together, it's not going to move your organization forward. I think we like to think that we're all very logistical people, that change management will just put in all these processes to do these things, and we leave out the emotional side of change, the very human side of change, that we're creatures of habit. And so if we have not prepared for all of those conditions, we will not be able to see ourselves move in the way that we need to move. And that's incredibly impactful and important right now, and dangerous if we're not thinking about it, because we're actually in a moment where we have to move a lot faster than many of us ever would want to lead and move, but also are doing. So we got to diagnose before we design. And then we can layer these agile strategies over our own internal readiness. The Impact Triad doesn't replace adaptive tools at all. It just makes sure that they actually work. Scenario planning is fantastic. It's a really useful tool. But if you've done all these scenario plans and your culture isn't together, or the things that you want to move don't actually allow you to fit with, what you need to do for compliance, then it's not a useful exercise for you and it won't be effective. If you're doing a strategic learning agenda and you're like, look, this is what's going on in this very narrow area, perhaps that's immigration that impacts your work, and you're like, we got to get up to speed on what these rules and regulations are, what the policy is, etc. But you don't actually have the capacity to do that. You don't have a system and a process to be able to do that, as well as you don't have people who are aligned and energized and ready to get into that work. The strategic lending agenda will fall flat. And that's also the same with reset plans, which is what I'm really excited to be helping organizations do in our upcoming webinars and retreats, is actually designing a process to sort of reset, to understand this is where we're at, this is what we thought, and really put together culture, capacity, and compliance to make sure that that reset is something that we all have buy-in in. We're all very clear about what we need to do, and we have the ability to execute it. And this is important because when you pair these things together, for example, when you pair culture and compliance with scenario planning, you get strategic guardrails. We know that in the nonprofit space, mission creep is a huge issue. Board overreach and underreach are huge issues. And so when we put these things together, we're actually building systems that allow you to do what you need to do, to absorb feedback, to know where the boundaries are, and build a strategy that can breathe, that has space for flexibility and changing without people feeling like you're taking them on a roller coaster. Today it's this, tomorrow it's that. They understand and can follow the arc of where we're going. But when we don't layer in this internal review, the sort of leadership organizational diagnostic, and we don't have this aligned approach, we run into issues. Innovation can lead to burnout. Strategic change turns into compliance violations, right? I've definitely seen people say, oh, we need another revenue stream, and then they're out selling t-shirts, but we can't align that t-shirt sales with their mission. So now they're in the world where they are getting unrelated business income tax, which can be extremely expensive for organizations. Or maybe we decide, hey, the executive director's got to go, and we're going to take these different steps and do that. And it actually ends us up in a world where the decision we made to remove that leader actually puts us into the world where there may be some unearned kickbacks that look like that could raise the specter of concern once we go to file our 990s and all of those things. And so we want to be intentional about how we are moving so that when we're changing, we're not inviting compliance risks. And then, of course, if you're not layering this over, you're spending more time reacting than actually rebuilding. And I really, if I could do nothing else in this industry, would be to move more social change organizations away from a posture of reacting and into a posture of being proactive. We do a lot of defense. We do a lot of trying to make sure we keep this and that together so that our funders are still happy, that we're engaging our community members, that we're keeping our staff and our stakeholders together. But we're not always as proactive as like, give me the ball and actually we're going to design something different that works better. And what I would say is that when we spend all our time reacting instead of rebuilding or being proactive and protecting ourselves on the front end, we're not operating with strategy. That's theater. We're doing a lot of things, but we're not transforming. I know some of you know I ran for office, and I used to say to people, a lot of times what we're doing is tinkering. We're fixing the small things. We're reforming small things. When we actually need to be transforming. We actually need to be breaking down and moving away from patterns and practices that don't actually help us move forward or get to the impact that we desire, and be open to being a beginner and starting afresh and rethinking with new knowledge of how we can build something that's more enduring and more sustainable. And that is exactly what I'm going to be helping leaders do at the end of this month, is actually getting together in a no fluff session for leaders who are done with the guesswork. We're just tired of trying to figure out, what do we do? What do funders want? How do we pivot? How do we make up the dollars that are missing? How do we figure out how we get to a place where we're actually sustainable? And actually spending our time together doing and delivering that. And that is why I created our Reckon and Rebuild leadership briefing. This is not a training. It is not a webinar. This is us going into the war room, and it is an intimate environment for 20 leaders of organizations to come together and say, I need to know where my organization actually is. I want to uncover where my current strategy is like out of sync so that I can stop doing things that are actually not beneficial. and be confident doing new things that are actually going to allow me to determine whether I'm going to stabilize, scale, or shift in this season. And when you leave this 90-minute intensive, you will be clear on whether you're going to stabilize, you're in a position to stabilize, if you are in a position to scale, or if it's time to shift. I pride myself on being very honest. And the reality is that with these funding cuts and the way that this administration is moving, there are going to be nonprofits that have to close. And that is a sad situation for nonprofits who find themselves in that position. But there's an opportunity to make a dignified decision to close in a way that still leverages power. There are opportunities for people to merge and collaborate in ways that we have not seen as much as we would like to see in this industry, because some of our funders and the way that we have to all fight for dollars causes us to be more competitive than collaborative with each other. But this is absolutely a season where we have to think differently if this sector is going to persist. And we need it to, because the nonprofit sector actually adds incredible value to our communities, not just in the causes and communities that we support, where we're standing in the rubble left behind from what our government has failed to do and what private business has opted to not do or has exacerbated, not only because of the fact that we are employing a large subset of people in our society, or that we're contributing a ton to the GDP, but this sector needs to endure because it's the only space, the last space, that is thinking about collective wholeness and well-being and justice. And so we absolutely need it to exist. It is my absolute commitment to work with you all who are willing and able and ready to pivot to do something new in this season so that you have many more seasons to do important work. I invite you to join me at the Reckon and Rebuild leadership briefing so that we can get laser focused on what we need to do to move forward in this environment. So if your strategy isn't working, it's not your fault. I think we are creatures of habit. We've been told to do something. A lot of my peers are kind of sticking to this is how we've always done it. We'll continue to do it. And so it's not your fault, but it is absolutely your responsibility at this point to decide what you're going to do differently. The future belongs to the leaders who know how to adapt without abandoning their integrity. And I want to help you to do just that. So I encourage you to register now. It is open. It will happen Thursday, May 22nd, from starting at 12 p.m. Eastern. It is a paid opportunity. Again, we are trying to make sure that we hold the integrity of this space. It is limited in size for that, because I do want to make sure that I can really pour in and help the organizations that choose to be in that room, and that collectively this is a growing space and we can help each other. And if that sounds like the type of experience that you need, you absolutely want to sit with a strategist who has both a legal lens and legal precision, as well as organizational development and capacity building chops, then I encourage you to get in the room. We don't do things the way everybody else does it, because if you look at how everybody else is doing it, it's not actually panning out the way that we want. So we do take the narrow road to make sure that you ultimately end up in the place that you want to be. And so register today. Let's reckon with what is and rebuild what's next. I look forward to seeing you, if not at the next, at the leadership briefing. Please do follow me on social media, or join in on our list so you can get information real time to help you continue to grow. And with that, I hope that you have a great rest of the day and that you go lead audaciously. Be well.